In a private clinic nestled within the old rain-slicked streets of Lyon, southern France, silence reigned inside the sterile walls of the intensive care unit. Behind sealed doors, beneath the low hum of ventilators and the ticking of life support monitors, lay Olivia Turner, a 16-year-old girl suspended in stillness. She had been like this for months, her slim body unmoving, her eyelids closed as if in sleep. Yet she did not dream. Or if she did, no one knew how to reach her. A ghost of her former self, she hovered between life and oblivion. The machines told the doctors she was alive. Her heart beat with calm rhythm, her lungs breathed gently, unaided. But her mind was elsewhere, locked in some unreachable corner of her own soul. Every day, specialists, the finest neurologists in the region, examined her, adjusted her medication, scanned her brain waves. Their findings were always the same. She is stable, but unresponsive. Her brain activity flickered like that of someone in the lightest phase of sleep. But she would not wake. It was as though her consciousness had retreated deep into itself, unwilling, or unable, to return. Richard Turner, her father, sat beside her almost every day. The once powerful businessman, known throughout France for his real estate empire, now looked like a man decades older. His shoulders were slumped, his face gaunt, cheekbones hollowed by grief. He had abandoned everything, boardrooms, headlines, power plays, to sit here, in this whitewashed room, his hand holding his daughter's limp fingers. Sometimes he would speak to her in a low, cracked voice. Other times, he just watched her, or the rain curling down the glass outside the window. He had aged visibly in those months. His suits, once tailored and sharp, now hung loose around his thinner frame. His beard had grown in patches. His eyes were dull, bloodshot. His voice, when it did speak, sounded like something scraped from the bottom of a dry well. No matter how many times the doctors repeated their clinical verdict. There is no medical explanation for the coma. Richard would not accept that this was the end of her story. And then, one day, something impossible happened. It was a cold, wet morning. Thick gray clouds choked the sky over Lyon, the kind of sky that makes everything below it seem heavier. The wind slapped against the glass like unseen fingers. Rain ran in lines across the pavement, dripping from gutters and tree branches. Inside the ICU, nurses moved with quiet precision, adjusting IVs, recording vitals, barely exchanging words. In room 217, nothing had changed. Olivia still lay in her white-sheeted bed, unmoving. Richard sat in his usual chair, a worn notebook of memories open on his lap, a pen held idly between his fingers. He hadn't written anything in days. He just watched her, as he always did, a prisoner to his own hope. Then, the door to the ICU swung open, not cautiously, not gently, but with sudden force. A barefoot girl, no older than 10, small and disheveled, ran into the room. She wore tattered clothes, a threadbare coat 2 sizes too large, and her hair was wild, matted. Her face was dirty, her expression hollow, eyes empty yet strangely calm. She looked like a child who had come straight from the streets, a ghost of urban shadows, of back alleys and forgotten corners. One of the nurses shouted in confusion, but the girl had already crossed into the room. No one stopped her. The security guard posted nearby stood stunned, as though something beyond understanding had frozen his feet to the floor. Richard stood up sharply, stunned by the intrusion, his mouth open to protest, to call out, to demand someone remove this girl from his daughter's room. But the words caught in his throat. The girl walked forward with a strange calmness, as if she belonged in that room. She moved directly to the bed, where Olivia lay in her eternal sleep, and for a moment just stood there, looking at her. She didn't seem afraid of the tubes, the monitors, the clinical glare of hospital lights. She reached out with one hand, small, grimy, scratched, and placed her palm gently on Olivia's forehead. And then, in that instant, everything changed. The heart monitor spiked, not dangerously, but suddenly, as if Olivia's heart had recognized something. Her fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttered, once, twice. Then, her eyes opened. A gasp echoed through the room. One of the machines began beeping rapidly. A nurse dropped her clipboard. Richard's knees almost gave out. Olivia's eyes, unfocused, watery, moved slowly through the room, then found her father's face. She blinked once, then gave him a small, faint smile. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. Richard took a step forward, breath caught in his chest, afraid he was hallucinating. "Olivia," he whispered. Her lips parted, dry and weak. "Dad?" It was barely audible. A miracle born in a whisper. The ICU exploded into motion. Doctors burst into the room within seconds, alarms going off, nurses shouting codes and orders. They surrounded the bed, checking vitals, pulling up charts, speaking in urgent medical French. But nothing was wrong. Everything was normal. Miraculously, perfectly normal. Olivia was awake. But the girl, the strange barefoot child who had entered without permission, without explanation, had already vanished. No one saw her leave. The nurses searched the hallway. Security combed the floors. No one had logged her entrance. No surveillance footage captured her image. It was as if she had melted into the fog outside, swallowed by the city's damp, gray breath. Richard tried for weeks to find her. He put up signs, called journalists, contacted the police. He offered rewards, gave interviews. But no one knew anything. No street child matched the description. No records, no footage, no name. It was like she had never existed, except for one undeniable truth. She had touched his daughter, and Olivia had awakened. Even though science gave no answers, even though medicine could not explain it, Richard believed, with a conviction stronger than anything in his entire life, that something beyond reason had happened that day. A miracle, or something like it. Rain pounded the streets of Lyon like a soft war drum. In the quiet moments between the thunder, the city held its breath, not out of fear, but as if something sacred had passed through it and was now gone. Inside the hospital, the shock of Olivia Turner's awakening had not yet settled. Nurses still whispered about it in corners, their faces pale with confusion. Doctors kept reviewing the vitals over and over, rechecking her scans, running new tests. But everything came back clear. No signs of brain damage, no neurological trauma, no medical reason to explain why she had returned. Only one word kept circling the corridors like a ghost. Impossible. Olivia, now sitting upright in her bed, looked around at the world with cautious wonder, like someone who had been asleep for centuries. She was quiet, gentle, but fully aware. Her voice was soft and unsure, but her thoughts were clear. She answered every question the doctors asked, recalled her name, her age, her father's name. Her memory was intact, her comprehension sharp. It was as though she had simply gone somewhere, and now she was back. When they asked her what she remembered, she would pause, her eyes searching some distant place, and say only, "I was somewhere dark, but I wasn't alone." Meanwhile, Richard sat beside her, haunted not by joy, but by one question. Who was that girl? He replayed the moment in his mind again and again. The The torn coat, the barefoot steps, the way she'd walked directly to the bed with no hesitation. And that touch, not frantic, not desperate, but deliberate, almost ceremonial. How had she known? Why had she come? Where had she gone? 2 days after the awakening, Richard held a press conference. Something he had once been masterful at, now doing it with trembling hands. He stood before a dozen reporters, their cameras focused, microphones held out like weapons. "I'm looking for a little girl," he said. "She came into the clinic 2 days ago, around 10 years old. Dark hair, dirty face, no shoes. She touched my daughter's forehead and then disappeared. My daughter had been in a coma for over a year, and she woke up the moment that child touched her." Reporters were stunned. Some smirked, some whispered, but none interrupted. "I don't care who she is. I don't care where she's from. If anyone has seen her, I need to find her. Please." The footage went viral within hours. "Miracle Girl," read one headline. "Mystery Child Saves Coma Patient," said another. Some outlets scoffed. Others speculated wildly, calling it an act of God, an unexplained psychic event, or even a hoax. But the story was out, and the city began to buzz. Still, no one came forward. No neighbors, no school teachers, no police tips, nothing. The girl had vanished, and in her place, there was only silence. Meanwhile, Olivia's recovery progressed with surreal smoothness. She began eating on her own, walking with assistance. Her voice grew stronger. Her smiles became frequent. Yet every time Richard sat beside her and asked gently, "Do you remember the girl?" Olivia would hesitate, furrow her brow, and say softly, "I think I saw her. Somewhere in the dark. I heard her whisper my name, but I don't know how she got to me." Then she would look down at her hands and whisper, "She was very cold, but kind." Doctors dismissed these memories as neurological echoes, hallucinations formed by the mind in limbo. But Richard wasn't convinced. Something real had happened that morning. Something he couldn't explain, and yet couldn't ignore. He began hiring private investigators, offering large sums of money for any trace of the girl. They combed through every orphanage, every shelter, every underground clinic, back alleys, even train stations. Every piece of CCTV from that hospital's surrounding streets was pulled and reviewed. She was nowhere. No digital trace, no real-world identity, no birth record, no missing persons report matching her description. It was as though she had stepped into their lives from another reality, just long enough to bring Olivia back, and then stepped out again. 1 week later, Olivia woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, breathing hard. The nurse on duty rushed in. "What happened?" she asked, gently. Olivia looked around wildly. "She was here again. I saw her in the room." "Who?" "The girl. The same one. She was standing right there, in the corner." The nurse checked the room. No sign of anyone. "I heard her voice," Olivia insisted. "She said, 'You're not done yet.' And then she disappeared." The nurse wrote it down in the report as a post-trauma sleep hallucination. But Richard, who was called in at 4 a.m., thought differently. He sat on the edge of Olivia's bed, brushing her hair back gently. "Do you think she's still watching us?" he asked. Olivia nodded slowly. "Yes." Richard's voice trembled. "Do you feel scared?" She shook her head. "Number, I think. She's waiting for something." "For what?" "I don't know," she whispered, "but I don't think it's just about me." The next day, something else happened. Something the doctors couldn't explain. A second patient in the ICU, a teenage boy who had been in a coma after a car accident, woke up without any warning. The circumstances were eerily similar. Stable vitals, unchanged brain scans, no external stimulus. Yet suddenly, consciousness returned. He remembered nothing, only shadows, whispers, and once again, a nurse reported seeing a small figure in the hallway that night, a barefoot girl. But when they checked the cameras, nothing. Richard began to feel a growing dread mixed with awe. This wasn't just about his daughter anymore. Something was moving through the clinic. Something unseen, unnamed, powerful, and possibly not of this world. He sat alone in the hospital chapel that night, a place he hadn't visited in years, not since his wife's funeral. He lit a candle, trembling. "I don't know who you are," he whispered into the silence, "but if you're still out there, if you're listening, thank you. But tell me, why us? Why my daughter? What do you want?" No answer came, only the flicker of a flame. And in the distance, barely audible, the sound of bare feet on stone, echoing just once in the stillness before fading away. The days grew colder in Lyon, and the hospital, once a place of sterile routine, had become a place of unspoken dread. There was a sense, though no one dared say it aloud, that something unseen moved through its halls at night. Whispers traveled from ward to ward. Orderlies started quitting. Patients reported flickers of shadows, icy drafts in sealed rooms, strange dreams that all ended the same way, with a child's voice saying their name. Richard Turner sat in the director's office, a grim-faced man named Dr. Laurent Dufour. Papers lay untouched between them, reports of another coma patient awakening that morning without explanation. That made 3. "Coincidence?" Dufour asked, but he already knew the answer. "No," Richard said. "This is connected. Every one of them. They're tied to her." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small notebook. Inside were pages of sightings, testimony, descriptions. Every person who claimed to have seen the barefoot girl described her the same way. 10 years old, dark tangled hair, thin frame, empty eyes, and a presence that was more felt than seen. "She's coming back," Richard said. "Or maybe she never left." Dufour sighed, exhausted. "What are you suggesting? That this girl is, what, a spirit?" "I don't know what she is," Richard said, "but I know this. She didn't just save my daughter. She started something." That night, Olivia had another episode. She had been laughing with a nurse, playing with a small sketchbook, when suddenly she froze mid-laugh, her hand going rigid. "Olivia," the nurse said gently. The pencil fell from her fingers. Her eyes rolled back, and she began whispering, not in her voice, but something low, hollow, ancient. 9 more. The circle must close. The gate must open." The nurse panicked. Doctors were called. Machines beeped wildly. But after less than a minute, Olivia blinked, looked around, and said, "What happened?" She remembered nothing, but on her sketch pad was a drawing. Not hers. A charcoal shape. A door made of shadows. A circle of children, all faceless. Richard stared at it that night with trembling hands. He recognized the symbol in the center of the circle. He had seen it once, long ago, in an old photo album buried in the attic of his childhood home in Marseille. A symbol carved on a tree that had once stood near a monastery burned down in 1921. A tree no one had dared approach. He had forgotten it until now, and now it was back. The girl, the barefoot child, appeared again 3 nights later. A young intern named Sophie, staying late for an overnight rotation, was walking the lower corridor toward the records room when she saw movement, a flash of white, bare feet. She turned. There, at the end of the hallway, stood the girl. motionless, watching. Sophie felt her heart freeze. Something in the child's gaze made it hard to breathe. Not fear, something heavier, like standing in the presence of something ancient, something that remembered things the world had long forgotten. The girl raised one hand, not a wave, not a threat, just a gesture, like a signal, then turned and walked into the shadows. Sophie ran after her, heart pounding, but when she turned the corner, the hallway was empty. She searched for over an hour, checked every room. Nothing. But when she returned to her locker that night, a drawing had been slipped inside. A child's hand, a spiral shape on the palm, and beneath it, written in shaky letters, "It's not over." Meanwhile, Olivia began to change. She was still herself, but quieter, more watchful. She began waking at exactly 3:03 a.m. every night. Her eyes would snap open. She would stare at the door for exactly 3 minutes, then close her eyes again. One nurse tried speaking to her during these moments. Olivia didn't respond. She wasn't asleep, but she wasn't truly awake either. After the 5th night, Richard stayed in her room, watching from the chair as she opened her eyes at exactly 3:03. "Olivia," he whispered. She didn't look at him. She stared at the door. A chill passed through the room, though no window was open. Then she whispered, barely audible, "She's waiting." "For what?" Richard asked. Olivia blinked, turned her head slowly toward him, and said in a voice that was both hers and not hers, "For them to come back." The hospital tried to suppress the panic, but the staff knew. Patients waking, symbols appearing, electrical failures during specific hours, an untraceable chill in certain hallways. One night, the fire alarm went off, not from smoke, but from all the sensors being tripped simultaneously at 3:03 a.m. across the building. Surveillance footage showed static, no intrusions. But one frame captured something, a blur of motion, a small figure, crossing a hallway, barefoot. When Richard saw it, his breath caught. "It's her," he whispered. "She's not just visiting. She's staying." Desperate, Richard went to an old friend, Émile Moreau, a professor of medieval folklore at a local university. Émile listened carefully as Richard laid out the story. The coma, the awakening, the girl, the drawings. When Richard showed him the spiral symbol from the notebook, Émile went pale. "This," he said, "is ancient, far older than Christianity. A pre-Roman symbol, Celtic, maybe even older. It represents a threshold, a place between life and death, between waking and dreaming." "Why is it showing up now?" Richard asked. Émile looked at him. "Because something's trying to cross." Richard returned to the hospital shaken. He found Olivia standing by her window, eyes open, body rigid. "Olivia," he said. She didn't turn. He stepped closer. She whispered, "They're coming." "Who?" "The others." He looked down. In her hand was a drawing she had never made. A hallway, the hospital's lower level. A red circle drawn around a maintenance door, long sealed shut. Richard took the paper and ran. He reached the hallway, found the door. It was sealed, rusted over. But he heard something, breathing, on the other side. Then, a knock, 3 slow taps, and a child's voice. "Help me!" The knock echoed in Richard's bones, reverberating with something older than memory. Not sound, but vibration. It was soft, yes, but chilling, as if the knock had traveled not through air, but through time. 3 taps. Then silence. He stared at the rusted maintenance door in the hospital's lowest sublevel, a place long forgotten, even by the blueprints, covered in dust, wires running through the ceiling above it, like veins. The air was damp. Every instinct in him screamed to walk away. Then, the voice. A child's voice, barely more than a whisper. "Help me." His fingers trembled as he reached out and touched the handle. It was ice cold and sealed, bolted from the outside, from decades ago. Layers of paint and corrosion told the story of something not meant to be opened. And yet, something waited on the other side. Not just a person, a presence. He stood back, pulled out his phone, dialed the hospital director. No signal. He climbed back upstairs to the reception floor. "Is the sub-level maintenance corridor still in use?" he asked a junior nurse. She blinked at him, confused. "What sub-level?" Later that night, Richard returned to Olivia's room. She was awake, drawing again, but this time not alone. 2 other children were with her. 1 boy, 1 girl. Both patients in nearby wards, also recovered from unexplained comas in recent weeks. They sat silently on the floor beside her bed, cross-legged, drawing in sync. The same spiral symbol over and over again, not looking at the page, as if their hands were being guided by memory, not thought. Richard stood in the doorway, frozen. "Olivia?" he said softly. She looked up, and for the first time in weeks, he saw a different light in her eyes. She was afraid. "She's showing us," she said. "What she sees." "The girl?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "She's trapped, but she's waking up. And when she does—" She trailed off. The boy next to her spoke, his voice monotone, like in a trance. "The door will open." Richard couldn't sleep. Back home, he dug through old boxes, photos, family records, books. And then he found it. A photo, black and white, dated 1963. A field in the outskirts of Lyon. A makeshift building that once stood before the hospital was expanded. And in the background, unmistakably, the same rusted door. Half buried in earth even then. In the margins, someone had written, "Don't dig here." The children are still listening. The next morning, Richard stormed into Director Dufour's office with the photo. "You knew about this," he said. "This door, this room." Dufour hesitated, took the photo in shaking hands. "I didn't believe it was real," he admitted. "Just an old staff legend. A quarantine wing, closed after incidents. Records lost in a fire in the 80s. "Incidents?" Dufour looked up. Children vanishing. Patients dying without cause. One nurse who swore she heard laughter from inside the walls. Eventually, they sealed it, ordered the records destroyed. "And now it's waking up," Richard said grimly. "Do you want it opened?" Dufour asked. "No," Richard whispered. "But I don't think we have a choice." That night, the hospital descended into chaos. Every monitor in the coma wing went dark at 3:03 a.m. Nurses screamed. Every comatose patient, 7 total, sat up at once, eyes open, mouths moving. No sound came out, just the synchronized movement of lips, over and over again. "She's almost through." And in Olivia's room, her fingers pointed at the window. She whispered, "She needs us to remember." Richard looked out the window. There, across the courtyard, stood the girl, barefoot, watching. Her mouth didn't move, but her eyes said everything. "Come below." Richard descended the sub-level stairs alone the next evening. The flashlight in his hand flickered. The smell of mildew and rust filled his lungs. He stopped in front of the door. This time, the voice did not call out. But something else did. A vibration through the floor. Faint, like footsteps, or breathing. The flashlight caught something on the wall. Words, written in what looked like charcoal. 10 must enter. 1 must remain. His breath caught. Then a hand touched his shoulder. He spun. Olivia stood behind him, pale and barefoot. "Daddy," she said, "we have to go in." "She's waiting." "No," he said. "No way. You're not going near that thing." "It's already inside us," she replied. She pointed at the spiral painted in dust on the wall. "I dream of her memories now. She's not alone. There are others." "Others?" "Children like her," Olivia said, "trapped when they tried to close the gate." Richard stared at his daughter, suddenly aware she wasn't the same child who had fallen into a coma. She was someone else now. Or someone more. They returned upstairs, but the spiral had already begun spreading, drawn on walls, carved into patient beds, etched into condensation on windows. Hospital security was called in. Parents removed their children. The coma ward was locked, but the drawings kept appearing. On closed doors, inside sealed rooms, even under skin. A nurse found a spiral faintly outlined on her forearm, as if burned there in sleep. Richard had only one option left. He called Emile again, but when the professor answered, his voice trembled. "I translated the full glyph," he said. "It's not a spiral. It's an eye." "A what?" "A watching eye. A veil. It means the barrier between our world and the dreaming realm has been weakened. And if she's crossing back—" He paused. "It won't be just one child." That same night, another child vanished. A boy from the 3rd floor. Cameras showed him walking calmly down the hallway, then turning toward a blank wall. Then he was gone. In his bed, a drawing. A circle of 10 children, all facing a door. Above it, "The gate remembers," and below, "The 10th is chosen." Richard couldn't escape the truth any longer. This wasn't an awakening. It was a summoning. The children weren't healing. They were gathering. Something had begun long ago, before the eye, and now it had returned. And at the center of it all, the barefoot girl. The one who crossed between. The one who would open the door. Olivia stood before him that evening, hands shaking. "I'm scared, Daddy," she said. He pulled her close. "So am I." She looked up at him with hollow eyes. "But it's already inside me." A storm rolled in over Lyon, black clouds pushing against the hospital's tall glass windows like a tide. Thunder did not come in claps, but in slow, rumbling murmurs, as if the sky itself were whispering warnings in a language too old to translate. It was the 3rd night since the 2nd child disappeared, and the hospital was falling apart. Staff turnover had doubled. Patients refused to sleep. Families demanded transfers, but some, mostly children, clung to the windows, staring out into the night, as if waiting for someone. Or something. Down in the sub-level corridor, the spiral was no longer just a symbol. It moved. Slight tremors pulsed outward from the sealed door, as if something inside it was breathing. And the symbols drawn in charcoal had grown darker, deeper, as if carved now into the very stone beneath the plaster. And then came the scream. It was a nurse. She had gone down to check the electrical panel, found something instead. The corridor beyond the door, which should not have existed, was open and pulsing with light, no longer sealed. The rusted bolts lay on the ground, snapped, not unscrewed. The heavy iron door creaked open by inches, revealing stairs that descended deeper than the building's blueprints had ever indicated. Beyond, only shadow. But in that shadow, movement. Director Dufour locked the floor immediately. Richard and Olivia were escorted home by police. The children were forbidden from drawing, speaking, even communicating with one another. Art supplies were removed. security guards posted on every floor. But it didn't matter. The dreaming had already begun. That night, Olivia sat upright in bed, eyes wide open, not blinking. Richard, sleeping in a chair nearby, was awakened by a strange sound, scribbling. Olivia's hands moved without her looking, drawing not on paper, but on her blanket. Symbols, circles, names, 10 in total, all children, some still in the hospital, some not. And in the center, always, the eye, bleeding, watching. He shook her. "Olivia! Wake up!" She did, but the voice that answered wasn't hers. "She's opening the gate. You cannot stop it now." The next morning, Professor Emile called from his university office. "I found it," he whispered. "Found what?" "The original records. The hospital stands over an old orphanage. Burned down in 1947. 10 children went missing during a séance conducted by a patient. Only one body was found, a girl, barefoot. Charred but intact. No explanation ever given." Richard's blood ran cold. "And her name?" Emile paused, then read softly. "Olivia Marchand." Richard dropped the phone. "No," he thought, "that can't be." His daughter, was named after his grandmother. He and his wife had chosen the name before birth. It was a coincidence. It had to be. But doubt, once planted, grows quickly in the dark. That night, Richard stood outside Olivia's room, watched her sleep, or what looked like sleep. Then her voice broke the silence. "She showed me how it burned, how they screamed. They locked her in because they were afraid." He stepped closer. "Who, Olivia?" She was the first to see the gate. The others followed her, but they didn't listen. They thought it was just dreams, so the adults sealed it and buried her. "Buried who?" Olivia's eyes opened slowly. "The girl in the mist." The next day, a psychiatrist came to evaluate the children. He never made it past the elevator. They found him in the stairwell, curled in a fetal position, eyes wide open, murmuring, "She walks behind the veil. She walks behind the veil." He never spoke again. Back in her room, Olivia drew a new symbol. This one, different. A map. Richard recognized the layout, the hospital floors, the staircase, the sublevel, but underneath, a new layer. Catacombs, a hidden space beneath even the lowest known structure. Tunnels that shouldn't exist. At the center, a second door, and next to it, written in strange, spidery text, "Door of Remembrance." Once opened, the dreaming one walks. Richard brought the map to Emile, who paled when he saw it. "This isn't just a symbol," the professor said. "It's a summoning ritual." "A ritual?" "Yes, 10 children, 10 offerings, and one keeper, the first who crossed. Olivia, or what lived in her now. They planned to evacuate the hospital the next morning, but it was too late. At 3:03 a.m., alarms went silent. Electricity flickered out, floor by floor. The building fell under a strange, gray glow, as if moonlight had replaced all light, even indoors. Doors locked. Windows refused to break. There is no silence like that beneath the earth. Richard's breath echoed in the dark, too loud, too sharp, like a stranger's inside his own chest. The staircase behind the rusted door twisted downward in unnatural angles, as if the laws of gravity bent around it. It was stone, but warmer than it should be. Each step pulsed faintly, as if bones beneath the surface were beating. Olivia walked ahead of him. She didn't look back. But her voice, not spoken, but inside his head, said clearly, "Don't look directly at the walls. Don't listen to the whispers." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to, because as he passed the first landing, he heard them. Soft, layered murmurs. Not one voice, hundreds. Some chanting, some sobbing, some whispering in broken French, others in languages older than any he'd ever heard. And the walls, they moved, not constantly, just barely, like something breathing behind stone. Hands pressed from beneath, leaving faint shapes in the black surface before vanishing. Richard focused on Olivia's bare feet in front of him. Step after step. Down, down, down. The stairs had no end, no turns, no sense of depth. It was as if time had collapsed here, all past and future crushed into this narrow, living throat. Finally, they reached a chamber. Massive, circular, lit not by lamps, but by something in the walls themselves. A dull crimson glow, like fireflies sealed in amber. 10 stone plinths surrounded the center. On each, a child. Still, silent, eyes closed. The ones from the hospital, draped in ceremonial cloth, their names scratched into the stone. And in the center, on a raised dais, stood her. The barefoot girl, still 10 years old, still wearing the same torn dress, her face still streaked with soot. But her presence, it was wrong. Too tall, too still. Her eyes held the knowledge of centuries. Her body might be small, but what wore it was far older. She opened her mouth, but the voice did not match the body. "We are ready." Richard stepped forward, shielding Olivia instinctively. "What are you?" he asked. The girl tilted her head. "We are what your world has forgotten. The first dreamers. We were taken by fear, sealed beneath ash and stone. But we waited. And your daughter brought the key." Richard shook his head. "You're using her. Let her go." The girl stepped down from the dais. "I did not take her," she whispered. "She came to me. She is the last of us. The keeper, reborn. The one who remembers. The one who stayed behind when the fire came." Olivia stepped beside her. "She's telling the truth," she said calmly. "I saw it in my dreams. I was her. I burned. But I stayed. And now I'm both." Richard backed away. "Number, this isn't right. You're all children." "Not anymore." The chamber walls shifted. A massive spiral burned into the stone floor began to rotate, not physically, but in perception, as if eyes could no longer trust themselves. The 10 children on the plinths opened their eyes in unison, bright white, unblinking. The barefoot girl raised her hand. A crack appeared in the center of the spiral, splitting open like a mouth. Behind it, nothing. Not darkness, not light. Something outside of comprehension, a void that bled dreams. "Beyond this," she said, "is the place before memory, where souls are unmade, where we came from." Richard dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the vision. "Why?" he whispered. "Why come back?" The barefoot girl looked at him with something like sorrow. "Because we were forgotten. Because pain has a shape, and silence feeds it." She looked at Olivia. "You must choose now." Olivia turned to her father, and for a moment, just a moment, the little girl he remembered was back in her eyes. "Daddy," she said, voice breaking, "if I stay, the gate closes. For good. No more children, no more whispers." He stepped forward, reaching for her. "Number, you're coming back with me. We'll find another way." But the barefoot girl shook her head. "There is no other way." Olivia turned, walked slowly toward the gate. The spiral beneath her feet pulsed brighter with each step. As she reached the edge of the void, she turned one last time. Tears ran down her cheeks. "I love you, Dad." And then she stepped into the spiral. The room shattered, not with sound, but with silence. Everything folded inward, sucked toward the point where Olivia vanished. The barefoot girl smiled and followed. Then each of the children, one by one, dissolved into light. white tendrils reaching out, dancing, vanishing into the walls. The red glow dimmed, the chamber darkened, the spiral slowed, and stopped. Only Richard remained. He awoke hours later, or days, in a hospital bed. No children's ward, no sublevel, no spiral door. Doctors told him he had collapsed during a stress-induced hallucination. There was no record of Olivia, no admissions under her name, no files, no photos. Not even the name Olivia Turner existed in hospital archives. But he remembered. He always would. Later, back in his apartment, Richard opened a drawer. Inside, a single drawing, done in pencil, on the back of a hospital blanket, a spiral, a girl, and 10 small names written in a circle. The last one, Olivia. He stared at it until sleep came, and in the silence of his dreams, he heard her voice. She walks behind the veil, but she remembers you. The city of Lyon awoke with no memory of what had happened. The hospital, once full of whispers, stood quiet now. Repainted, renamed, its lowest floor permanently sealed due to mold issues, according to the press. Nurses transferred, doctors reassigned, files redacted or lost entirely. But memory is not always recorded in paper. It lingers in walls, in dreams, in scars. And somewhere, beneath floors no longer mapped, the spiral still glowed, dimmer now, as if sleeping, waiting. Richard Turner left Lyon within the month. He didn't sell his apartment. He left it intact, as if he might return, though he knew he wouldn't. He carried with him only a small black suitcase and a folded drawing in his coat pocket. The same drawing his daughter had made. The spiral, the names, the gate. He moved east. Not to forget, but to find answers. There were too many holes in the story. Too much buried. And though he was haunted, he wasn't broken. Because he still heard her. In dreams, in mirrors, in wind that pressed against windows at night. Like breath. She remembered him. He found his first clue in Vienna. An academic conference on psychological impressions and shared dreaming in children. Most of it was nonsense, but one presentation caught his eye, a child's drawing, dated 1965. It showed a spiral, 10 names in a circle, and in the center, a phrase in Latin, Porta Somniorum, the Gate of Dreams. Richard waited until the presentation ended. Approached the speaker, Dr. Eva Kranz. "Where did you get that drawing?" She looked up, cautious. From a closed ward in Berlin. Patient was 7 years old. Went missing in 1972. Same as the others. The others? She studied him. "You've seen it too, haven't you?" Richard didn't answer. Didn't need to. She handed him a file. Inside, photographs. Spiral symbols carved into the walls of underground asylums, names recurring, different languages, but the same root. 10 children. Always 10. One name appeared again and again in different variations. Alia, Olivia, Elvia, Alefa. It was her, every time. They sat for hours. Eva shared what she'd spent 20 years compiling. An undocumented pattern of disappearances linked to orphanages, hospitals, asylums, stretching across decades, even centuries. Locations: 1891, London 1910, Budapest 1947, Lyon 1965, Berlin 1984, Kyoto 2002, Johannesburg. Each time, 10 children gone. One remained, often found days later in a coma, or speaking languages they had no way of knowing. Most died shortly after. Except one. "Where's the survivor now?" Richard asked. Ava's voice lowered. "She's in custody. Has been for 19 years. Richard leaned forward. "Where?" She hesitated, then gave him the name of a facility. The drive to northern Romania took 3 days. Fog hung low in the valleys. Villages seemed abandoned even when inhabited. The facility stood alone on a mountain slope, unmarked, government-run, officially non-existent. They let him in because of who he claimed to be, a researcher on trauma and myth in institutionalized children. He knew the right language now, knew how to play the part. They led him through sterile white halls. "She doesn't speak much," the escort said. "No violent episodes, but no engagement either. She just watches." They unlocked a steel door. Inside, a plain room. A girl sat in the corner, no older than 12, but she'd been here nearly 20 years. She looked up, smiled. "You came," she said, in a voice not quite her own. Her name was Mircea, but it wasn't her true name. Richard felt it immediately, that same cold echo in the air he'd felt around Olivia. She walked slowly across the room, stopped 2 feet from him, eyes large, glassy, familiar. "Do you remember the fire?" she asked. Richard swallowed hard. "Yes." "Do you remember the choice?" "Yes." "Then you are marked." Her hand brushed his. It was like touching ice. His vision blurred, then opened. A vision. Catacombs deeper than those beneath Lyon. Spirals larger, carved into mountainsides. Whole towns vanishing. Doors, not metaphorical, but real, pulsing with symbols. In one, a child climbed backward into shadow. In another, a girl with glowing eyes knelt before a circle of candles, blood trailing from her palms. Voices chanted behind every image. A chorus, always 10. And one voice above all. Hers, Olivia's. "I'm still here," she said, inside him. "But she's not alone. There are others, like me, and something is waking them." The vision cracked like glass. He fell to his knees. Mircea stood over him. "You must go to Lisbon next," she whispered. "Why?" "The 10th door has opened." Back in his car, Richard stared at his reflection. His eyes were darker now. He hadn't slept in days, but he wasn't tired. Not really. He was changing. He knew it. Ava called him an hour later. "There's been a fire," she said. "A school in Lisbon. 10 children missing." Richard closed his eyes. The pattern was complete. The final gate was waking. And the spiral wasn't just a memory anymore. It was alive. Lisbon was on fire. Not in flames, but something deeper. A slow-burning hysteria had wrapped itself around the city like smoke. Newspapers used words like mass hysteria, gas leak, trauma contagion. But beneath the headlines, there was something far worse. 10 children had vanished from a boarding school near the Alfama district. No sign of forced entry, no evidence of a break-in. Just 10 empty beds, 10 pairs of slippers, 10 toothbrushes still wet, and a spiral carved into the tile beneath one of the beds. No one saw them leave, except one girl. She was 11, mildly autistic, drew pictures of the sleeping fire beneath the stairs, said the missing kids had walked into the dark behind the mirrors. She kept whispering the same word, Alepha. Richard arrived at dawn. He stood at the iron gates of the school, just as rain began to fall in thin, whispering sheets. Inside, the building looked old, but not ancient. Classrooms filled with computers, cafeterias with vending machines. Nothing unusual, nothing to suggest that one of the most ancient doors in history had opened just beneath its foundations. But it had, and he could feel it. Just like before. The hum in his chest, the shift in air pressure, the slow, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat from underground. He met with the headmaster. The man looked 10 years older than his age, pale, hands trembling. "We didn't see it coming," he whispered. "One night they were here, next day, gone. But that girl, He glanced toward the office window. She draws things I cannot explain. Richard stepped into the adjoining room. There she sat, hair in two tight braids, bare feet dangling from the chair. She looked up, smiled, not like a child, but like someone much older wearing the shape of one. "I know you," she said. "Do you?" Richard asked softly. "You walked the Lion Gate." He sat down slowly across from her. "Where are the others?" "In the Vale," she said. "They're waiting. But they can't finish it without the 10th. "The 10th what?" She leaned closer, her voice like rustling leaves. "The 10th dreamer." Ava arrived the next day. She brought papers, photographs, every documented gate, every spiral. She looked pale and shaken. "I ran the names," she whispered. "From the original drawings, from Berlin, from Kyoto, the 10 names. I cross-referenced them with birth records, orphanages, adoptions, missing persons." Richard looked up. "And?" Her hands trembled as she laid down the papers. "They're the same children." He blinked. "You mean similar?" She shook her head violently. "Number exactly the same. Born years apart, on different continents. But the names, the drawings, the blood types, everything matches. It's the same 10 children, reborn again and again, every few decades." He stared in stunned silence. Ava whispered, "And every time, one survives, one remembers." Richard felt the weight of her meaning. "This cycle, it's not just repeating," he said slowly. "It's escalating." She nodded. "And Lisbon is the final node, the last gate, the spiral's end, or its beginning." The school had a sub-basement, sealed after the earthquake in 1755. Legend said it had once been part of a Jesuit monastery. The girl led them there. Torch in hand, she descended the cracked stone steps, barefoot and fearless. Ava followed. Then Richard. The air changed by the 4th level. The moisture felt wrong, sticky, humming, like the walls had lungs. They reached a circular room. Damp stone, rotten wood, dead insects. At the center, a door. Ancient, iron, carved in something older than Latin. And across it, the spiral, but larger than ever before, stretching from wall to ceiling, pulsing in the torchlight. Ava gasped. "This is it!" Richard stepped closer. "Do you hear it?" he asked. She frowned. "Hear what?" "The song." To him it sounded like singing. Faint voices, distant, layered, each one familiar, each one lost. He pressed his palm against the spiral. The door vibrated, not just physically, internally, like something ancient recognized him. And then the door opened. Not outward, not inward. It folded, as if the world itself had peeled back like a curtain. Behind it, a hallway of black glass. Endless reflections. 10 children stood at the far end, holding candles that burned upside down, flames reaching downward like roots. One turned. Olivia. Her face unchanged, her smile fragile. "I knew you'd come," she said. He took a step inside. Ava grabbed his arm. "If you go, you may not return." "I know." He turned to her. "Close the gate if I don't come back." She shook her head. "You don't understand. If you go through and the gate closes, that's it. No one comes back. Not even memories." He nodded slowly and stepped into the hallway. As he walked, the black glass mirrored him, but not accurately. Some reflections showed him older, others younger. In some he wore hospital robes, in others he had no eyes. Each step deeper altered his perception of self. When he reached Olivia, the hallway disappeared. Now they stood in a void, white, vast, floating symbols around them. Language long dead. 10 children formed a circle, and a great spiral pulsed beneath their feet. Olivia turned to him. "You are the 10th, she said. No, he replied, confused. I'm not one of you. She smiled sadly. You became one when you chose to remember. You carry the burden, and the gate opens from within you now. The spiral pulsed once more, then cracked. Suddenly, the white void shattered into fire. Not heat, memory. He saw it all. Every cycle, every gate. The burning of the monastery in 1431, the drowning of the orphanage in 1792, the plague ward collapse in 1906, the hospital in Lyon, the girl in the furs, the whispering walls. He was there in all of them, watching, forgetting, remembering. He collapsed, screaming, until silence claimed him. When he awoke, Olivia was gone. The other children, gone. He stood alone, inside the empty chamber beneath Lisbon. The spiral door was closed. The torch burned low. Ava sat by the entrance. She looked at him. Did you stop it? She asked. Richard looked at his hands. They shimmered faintly, as if light no longer clung to him. No, he said softly. I became it. Lisbon never made the news. Not in the way it should have. 10 children missing, a centuries-old basement rediscovered, strange tremors felt by thousands, and yet the headlines buried the truth under phrases like infrastructure collapse or delusional panic linked to gas leak. But people knew. They felt it in their dreams. They began drawing spirals without knowing why. Children murmured in their sleep in languages no one could identify. In Japan, a girl woke from a coma and spoke in Latin. In Argentina, a boy carved 10 names into a tree, names he had no way of knowing. In Seattle, a psychiatrist leapt from a hospital window after describing a voice inside memory itself. Something had broken. The gate in Lisbon wasn't a door. It was a signal. And now it was echoing across the world. Richard Turner disappeared. Eva never saw him again after the chamber, but 2 weeks later, she received a box. Inside, a journal written in handwriting that flickered between Richard's and someone else's. A map with 11 spiral sites circled in red, not 10, and a drawing done in a child's hand. A door, half open, with the word "Remember" scrawled beneath it. The journal described things she couldn't understand. It spoke of the dreaming beneath matter, of layers of time, of how memory wasn't stored in the brain, but in the world itself. He said the spirals weren't symbols, they were locks, and now something was waking. Elsewhere, in places far from Lisbon, a retired monk in Tibet wept uncontrollably for 9 hours, speaking only one word, Alefa. In Ukraine, a coal mine collapsed into a perfectly circular pit. No survivors. A spiral etched into the rock. In South Africa, a blind woman drew a map of every known gate, perfectly. All around the globe, events were synchronizing, but not logically, temporally, as if the past, present, and future were beginning to overlap. Historians found books rewritten. Archivists uncovered photos with new figures that hadn't been there before. And worst of all, people began forgetting. Eva's mother called her one night in tears. She didn't remember Eva, didn't know her own address, didn't know the name of the country. It was spreading, not like a virus, more like a reversal. Memory dissolving backward, people forgetting not just facts, but identities. Loved ones, their own names. Hospitals overflowed with patients whose MRI scans showed nothing wrong. But they were gone, like their minds had been pulled through a crack in time. Eva knew what was happening. The spiral wasn't killing people. It was rewriting reality. And every dreamer who had ever touched a gate was becoming an anchor point for the new world. Richard hadn't died. He had become part of the mechanism. Eva returned to Lyon. The hospital had been gutted. but the foundation was intact. She climbed beneath the structure into the dust choke. Ruins. Found the spiral room again. The walls still hummed. She sat in the center and waited. For hours, then days. Then, one night, she dreamed of Richard. He stood at the edge of a black river. Behind him, 10 children in a circle. He reached toward her. "You must choose," he said. "What?" "To wake them, or to end the line." She looked at the children. Their eyes shimmered like glass. And then she woke, screaming. The next day, Eva received an email. No sender, no subject, just an attached photo. A grainy security cam image of a girl walking into a children's hospital in Los Angeles, wearing a fur coat, barefoot, face smudged with ash. Eva zoomed in. It was the same girl who had awakened Olivia years ago in Lyon. Unaged, unchanged, impossible. Eva took the next flight. The hospital had no record of the girl, no footage either. The image had been scrubbed. But the same day, a comatose child had awakened after 4 years, whispering a poem about a door made of sleep. The walls of his room had small spirals scratched into the plaster. The boy repeated one phrase again and again, 10 shall fall. 1 shall carry. The world shall twist and bloom. The storm was building, not a natural one, but one of memory, identity, and time. People across the world started referring to people who had never existed. Places appeared on maps where oceans had been. Children drew people who had never lived. Reality was unraveling, not violently, but rhythmically, like a song repeating, like a record scratching and playing the same bar of melody. Eva's hair began falling out. She stopped sleeping. She saw herself in reflections doing things she hadn't done. In one mirror, she saw Olivia behind her, smiling. She received a final message, a page torn from Richard's journal. No envelope, no handwriting, just the page. It read, "The spiral isn't a symbol. It's a wound. Every gate was an attempt to close it. But the 10th was never a gate. It was the key. And I am the lock. Olivia carries the memory of the world. If she wakes fully, there will be no difference between dream and waking. This is not prophecy. This is recursion. This is the first time. Again." Eva stood at the shore, Los Angeles behind her, the water silent. No waves, no wind. And in the sky, faintly, briefly, she saw it. A spiral of stars, slowly turning, opening. And somewhere behind her, a child began to sing a lullaby in a language not spoken for 5,000 years. There is a place beneath all places, older than architecture, older than language. It is not found on any map, nor etched in any archive. But it exists, and Eva stood at its threshold. The journey began days ago, yet time had become meaningless. She no longer counted by hours or sunlight, but by fragments, flashes of memory that weren't her own. She saw glimpses of Olivia as a child in the forest, Richard building something in the snow, weeping, the barefoot girl walking through fog that shimmered like glass, and through it all, one shape repeated, the spiral, endless, alive, calling. She arrived in Montségur, in the French Pyrenees, an ancient Cathar stronghold, a place whispered of in arcane circles. Legend said the heretics died protecting a portal of sleep. Now Eva knew. They were guarding the 11th spiral. It wasn't a gate. It was the origin, where memory was born, and where it would now return. She entered the ruins, snowflakes like ash drifting from the sky, the air still, no birdsong, no movement, just the soft pulse of something beneath the ground, a rhythm older than her heartbeat. She descended, deeper into the belly of the stone, each corridor carved with spirals, Some crude, others impossibly intricate, patterns so deep her eyes burned to follow them. And then she found the door. It was not physical, but it was real. A shimmering veil of light suspended in the cavern like a curtain of liquid mirror. It pulsed with every breath she took, and as she reached toward it, a voice behind her. "I hoped you'd come." Richard stood in the shadows, or rather, something wearing Richard's face. His features were softened, his skin translucent, but the eyes, they were like glassy galaxies, infinite and unblinking. "It's not too late," he said. "You can still walk away." Ava shook her head. "I've come too far. You've come full circle." He gestured toward the veil. "The 11th spiral is not a place, it's a choice. And once made, nothing can be undone." "I don't want to undo anything," Ava whispered. "I want to understand." He stepped aside. "The spiral isn't chaos, it's correction." "What do you mean?" "The universe fractures under the weight of memory. Every moment, every grief, every mistake, it adds weight. Over millennia, it distorts reality, like bending light through broken glass. The spiral unwinds that distortion. It returns everything to the origin." "So, forgetting is the cure?" "Number becoming is." He reached out, touched her forehead, and suddenly Eva remembered everything, not just her life, but lives that weren't hers. She was a boy lost in a forest 1,000 years ago. She was a woman giving birth in a tent before the flood. She was a monk chiseling a spiral into stone in a cave of fire. She was Olivia, and the barefoot girl, and Richard, and something older than names. The truth collapsed into her like light imploding. The spiral wasn't a symbol. It was the memory of the first forgetting. The moment the world began to divide itself into dream and waking, life and death, self and other. And now, she had reached the center. Richard faded, his voice an echo in her bones. "I was the lock. You are the key. Open the spiral, and all will awaken." She stepped forward and passed through the veil. There was no light on the other side, no sound, just a vast white plain, and 10 children standing in a circle. They turned to her, eyes blank, waiting. In the center, a mirror. Ava approached it, looked in, and saw not her reflection, but everyone, every face that had ever lived. A swirl of souls turning inward. One by one, the children raised their hands, pointed to her, and spoke, in one voice, "Will you return the world to silence?" Ava's heart pounded. Tears spilled freely, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of knowing. She looked at the mirror, then at the children, then whispered, "No, I will remember." And the spiral opened. Across the world, people stopped moving, for a heartbeat, a pause, and then they began to remember everything, not just their lives, but truth. The boy in São Paulo who forgot his mother remembered her lullaby. The woman in Moscow who hadn't spoken in years wept and whispered her lover's name. The old man in Johannesburg gasped as he recalled his first step 70 years ago. And in a hospital in Los Angeles, Olivia opened her eyes again, fully, truly, alive. Ava stood alone on the spiral plane, the children gone, the mirror cracked. But she was smiling, because memory was not a curse. It was the shape of love. The spiral would always turn. But now, we would turn with it, together.